Efendim herkese günaydın. Ben eğitim etkinliğimizi başlatmak istiyorum. Zamanında girmiş olan katılımcılarımıza da saygısızlık etmemek anlamında. Efendim yürütücüsü, uygulayıcısı başkanlığımız olan, yararlanıcısı ise siz kamu kurum ve kuruluşlarımıza yönelik olan İPA 3 Teknik Destek Projemiz kapsamında finanse edilen Türkiye Yatırım Platformu Mekanizması eğitimimizin 2. bölümüne hoş geldiniz. Dün yarım gün olarak dizayn etmiştik etkinliğimizi. Bugün de öğleye kadar yarım gün olarak yine teknik destek projemiz altından çok değerli 2 uzmanımız, hatta Tomaş dahil olmak üzere takım liderimiz ve tekrar hep beraber aktif bir şekilde kaldığımız yerden eğitimimize devam edeceğiz. İlk gün ne görmüştük? Kısaca özetlemek gerekirse, küresel anlamda değişen finansman ihtiyaçları çerçevesinde Avrupa Komisyonu'nun İPA'nın katılım öncesi mali yardımın 2021-27 yıllarına ait 3. döneminde ülkemize de önerdiği bir garanti mekanizması yapısı vardı. Kredi garantisi mekanizması yapısı vardı. Bu kapsamda bizim de ülke olarak bu platform, bu mekanizma çerçevesinde ilave fonlara, kredi anlamındaki fonlara erişmemiz mümkün idi. Bununla alakalı dün AB'nin harmanlama dediğimiz yöntemle nasıl proje finansmanını yürüttüğünü görmüştük. Bu sefer de bu yarım günlük eğitimimizde de Avrupa Sürdürülebilir Kalkınma Fonu Plus garantileriyle alakalı yine eğitimimize devam ediyor olacağız. Ben bu vesileyle, çünkü kapanışta unutabilirim, dün de bizimle beraber olan tercümanlarımıza, çevirmenlerimize özellikle teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Dün unutmuştum çünkü teşekkür etmeyi ve sunumlarını yapmaları için sözü Magdalena'ya bırakıyorum. Magdalena, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot and good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to ask if I could share my screen. I have the host disabling participant screen sharing message. If you could allow me to share screen, please.
Now it's open.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good morning again to everyone. It's my pleasure this morning to be with you here and to discuss in more detail the EFSD EU budgetary guarantee. I want to structure this presentation a bit because yesterday we had a very good discussion. So today I really want to organize it in few parts. First of all, I will recap a bit on what we discussed yesterday in the setting the scene. Secondly, I will speak a bit about the guarantee windows and the architecture under the EFSD Plus for the period 21-27. Then I'll focus on the open access guarantee, specifically on the investment windows that we expect, as well as on the implementation process. And I'll finish with some guarantee examples of typical guarantee structures. I hope this will take about an hour, and please, during this time, if you could ask your questions, ideally in English, through the question and answer box. At the end, I hope we have time to answer. If not, after the coffee break, we will have more time also to continue with questions and answers. Sorry. As we started discussing yesterday, in the previous period, so in the previous 2017-2020, there was an evolution of EU financial instruments. There was a new budgetary guarantee of around 1.5 billion, which was added to the existing blending facilities. And this is basically what the EFSD included. This is the European Fund for Sustainable Development. It was the first pillar of the external investment plan for the period that was adopted in 2017. This new EFSD guarantee was only provisioned at 50%, meaning that only 50% of the amount of the guarantee was actually reserved as cash in the EU budget. So this is about 750 million. This meant basically for the first time that the Commission tried to use the weight of the EU budget to do more in external action. And again, this complemented the blending facilities that already existed and were functioning at the time. The guarantees and the blending facilities basically were organized on the new regional investment platforms and implemented through a partner financial institutions, which are basically multilateral or bilateral development finance institutions that have undergone the process of being pillar assessed, meaning that they can manage EU funds, the funds from the EU budget. This pilot, because it was a pilot, it was piloted only in 2 regions at the time, in the sub-Saharan Africa and in the neighborhood South and East. Actually was very successful. It mobilized more than 17 billion euro of investment, and overall for the EFSD, over 50 billion of investment, achieving 10 times leverage over this period, meaning for every €1 that the EU provided, 10 more euro were raised or more mobilized as a result of the combination of these 2 instruments. Again, this is not the only instrument that the EU uses, it's just a new tool in the toolbox of the EU, but grants, technical assistance, of course, continue to be very, very important. And this pilot is now scaled up in the next period, so in the period 2021-2027, this is the new multi-annual financial framework for the EU. And in this period, the size of the EU budgetary guarantee is significantly increased. There is an external action guarantee. It's a new instrument under the new Global Europe regulation that is the main governing instrument for using EU funding in external cooperation during this period 21-27. The external action guarantee backs EFSD Plus Guarantee to support public and private investment at around 40 billion euro. So as you can see, significant increase. Secondly, there has been also significant increase, widening of the geographic scope and actually of the spectrum of investment that is possible, bringing sovereign operations and private sector operations in a single programming process, and that allowed simplification, lots of complementarities. And the programming for how this instrument is used is using a policy-first approach, meaning that the operations are aligned with the EU overarching policy priorities. We spoke a bit about this yesterday. There is also a novelty, and I'll speak about this in terms of working with a wider range of implementing partners. Again, the EU guarantee is complementing also blending and technical assistance and other forms of EU support. I want to just recap also a bit on the guarantee windows that are available under the EFSD Plus Guarantee. I mentioned yesterday, they are broadly divided in 3 parts. They are sovereign and non-sovereign, kind of sovereign and non-commercial sub-sovereign windows. And this is an exclusive window for EIB with beneficiaries which are public entities, governments, and entities that are fully backed by the state. This is very important because there is significant need to increase investments in public infrastructure, and it is really the public sector that is there to provide the example, to set the example, to lead by example. So this sovereign and non-commercial sub-sovereign operations of EIB will continue the external lending mandates of EIB that the EIB had. It has been backed by the EU since the late 70s using external mandates, but now these external lending mandates of EIB are combined also with the rest of the operations, meaning that, again, the governance The programming is sharper, it's more aligned with the policy priorities, and it's simplified. Secondly, there is also a commercial sub-sovereign window. Again, it's a window with dedicated finance managed by EIB. It's non-exclusive. Also, other financial counterparts can also provide commercial sub-sovereign operations. However, it's very positive that there is also a dedicated window that EIB manages, meaning these operations will take place. And these specific examples are especially for public water, sanitation, utility companies. So these are public entities that can finance themselves. They can have access to direct finance in the market, but this window allows to leverage this finance. And thirdly, there are private operations, and these are the this is the open access window that is around 13 billion, so increased from 1.5 billion in the previous period to 13 billion in the new period. And I'll speak a bit more about this. But before I speak about it, I wanted to just focus a bit on what really, I mean, we speak sometimes, you know, with the buzzwords, a guarantee, but I mean, just to make sure we are on the same page, what really a guarantee is. It's a legally binding agreement in which a guarantor agrees to pay part of an amount that is due on a financial obligation if a number of agreed events take place. This is an instrument that is used to reduce risk. And this is when we say de-risking, that's really what we mean. Also, when we talk about de-risking and using guarantees, I'm sure a lot of people will ask themselves, well, what kind of risks really are there? Well, there are a variety of risks. This could be risks linked to repayment, for instance. These are credit risks. It could be linked to a new technology, technical risk, complexity of projects. It could be market risks. It could be legal regulatory risks, for instance, changing tariffs or revoking a license or changing legislation. It could be financial risks linked to cash flow availability or to currency issues, including convertibility, fluctuation of currencies. It could be business climate risks or country risks. So a variety of risks, and those risks are known to deter investment. The EFSD Plus Guarantee, yes?
Excuse me, Magdalena, could you please,
yes.
Because that slide was quite inspiring to me. I'm a former banker as well. Could you please, share a bit of, insights, about how the Commission is looking at the whole portfolio at risk, outstanding loans, and defaulting loans. Those terms, because I think people might be keen to look at it. What is the overall success, because we are promoting everything, but there are those risks.
Yes, absolutely. Thomas, thanks. This is a very good question. Would you mind? I just want to focus on this question, but I have actually a slide.
Cover this topic, yes. During the day.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's an excellent question. I want to talk a bit about the EFSD Plus Guarantee in this third window, which I showed on the screen. This is what's called open access. It's open access because this window is accessible to a wider range of implementing partners that can implement the budgetary guarantee. And it's really meant to mobilize investment and improve access to finance, specifically to crowd in private capital. So this is why it's called open access and private operations window. By private operations, again, this can include variety of beneficiaries. This could be MSMEs, it could be mid-caps, it could be larger corporates, it could be entities that are public in nature, sub-sovereigns, that are commercial in terms of their operations. So it could be financial counterparts such as local financial intermediaries. Again, a wide variety of of final beneficiaries can benefit from this open access window. The size, once again, is 13 billion euro, which is a significant increase from the 1.5 billion that was in the previous period. This is why I want to focus on this window, because I think it is the core of the implementation of the EFSD Plus Guarantee. Again, just to recap, what really this guarantee means. It's an unfunded guarantee that is backed by the weight of the EU budget, so AAA rating. Unfunded means that there is no actual cash money that is being transferred from the Commission to the implementing partners, so those that implement the budgetary guarantee. A transfer of cash occurs only if there is an event of default, if there are losses and the guarantee is caught and repayment needs to be made. So it's a non-funded instrument, no transfer of cash. This is a significant difference from grants or blending operations. Secondly, it's an unconditional, irrevocable guarantee on first demand. And that is fundamental for those of you that are financial experts. I'm sure banking experts are very familiar with this terminology, but unconditional, irrevocable guarantee is necessary for private sector partners and for the counterparts of this guarantee to really have trust in the instrument. It means that if there are limited number of conditions, those need to be agreed in the guarantee agreement. Again, we discussed it's a legally binding agreement. And it cannot be that additional conditions are added after this agreement is signed. Secondly, it cannot be that the Commission suddenly decides that it needs to revoke the guarantee. That is not possible. It cannot happen. It's an irrevocable instrument. Once it's signed, the Commission is there to honor its obligation under this instrument. And very importantly, it's an instrument on first demand. And I think this is very important also for this guarantee. And this is why it's also so attractive in the markets. On first demand, it means that once the implementing partner of the guarantee has losses, they can make a claim on the Commission and the Commission will pay on these losses. It would check the claim, the criteria, as to how this claim should look like and pay the claim. It's not that the Commission will wait until the implementing partner of the guarantee will go in the market and try to collect back their money, have some enforcement procedures. No. The moment there is a loss, they're entitled to make a claim and the claim will be honored. And that is why it's called on first demand. And that is very important also for the attractiveness of this guarantee. Thirdly, very important also for the attractiveness, it's a comprehensive guarantee. I showed various risks that on the previous slide, commercial risks, political risks, currency risks, yes, a variety of other risks. But the guarantee can cater for a wide range of risks. So it's a comprehensive set of risk coverage. It's not meant to cater just for one specific risk. Again, very different from grants and from blending. This instrument is priced. It's a remunerated instrument. And this is basically quite a new feature of EU financial instruments. It means that there is a remuneration for using it, for accessing it, that is agreed between the Commission and the implementing partner. Of course, the remuneration is attractive because the Commission is not estimating any costs for the capital that it uses to back up the guarantee. So I mentioned, if it's 13 billion, then 50% of this 13 billion need to be reserved in a provisioning fund so that there is a total liquidity to pay if there are claims on the guarantee. However, as these funds come from the geographic envelope, so these are grant funds, but these are grants in reality, they're at no cost to our counterparts and to our final beneficiaries. And this is the reason why the guarantees, while it is remunerated, the pricing terms are attractive compared to the risk, because the price is estimated based on the assumed risk, based on the risk. There are also some additional criteria based on which some of the remuneration, the pricing can be reduced. These are impact criteria, especially situations of fragility that could warrant such reductions in price. And I mentioned also the guarantees provided via eligible partner financial institutions. These are typically multilateral or bilateral European financial institutions. It could be also some of the international partners. For instance, in the first period, there was a guarantee agreement signed with IFC. There were also negotiations with AFDB, which is the regional bank for the African continent. So regional development finance institutions also participated, but most of the guarantees were signed with European, either multilateral, EIB, EBRD, or bilateral financial institutions. However, I also mentioned yesterday, there is a derogation, and it is actually possible that a wider number of counterparts become eligible partners to implement the guarantee, provided they meet certain conditions. And the idea is to attract actually private sector partners that could also develop innovative financial products, increase the interest in using also the guarantee. But while this is possible, it's still being experimented, and most of the partners currently are the established public development finance institutions that also have the experience in working with these instruments and working in the target regions. I also wanted to explain that this guarantee works as a program. So it's not a guarantee that's provided on a specific project or for a specific operation, but it is provided for a program that includes a portfolio of projects and operations. And we'll talk a bit more about this when we discuss the investment windows. Again, the objective here is to catalyze private investments and develop markets. A main feature of budgetary guarantee, of EFSD plus budgetary guarantee, is risk management. And again, this is very different from other instruments that the Commission used before in previous periods, previous financial frameworks in external action. Overall, in this new period, 21-27, there would be an unprecedented portfolio of budgetary guarantees coming to around 80 billion euro. This includes EFSD Plus budgetary guarantee for external actions, as well as the budgetary guarantees under InvestEU. We discussed yesterday that EFSD was inspired by a similar instrument that was developed for inside the European Union. And compared to the legacy of euro 60 billion from the previous period that included the external lending mandates for EIB, the EFSD guarantee, the budgetary guarantee under the European Fund for Strategic Investments, you could see in this next period, there would be a significant increase from 60 billion to around 80 billion. This is why it's so important for, I think, for Turkey to be able to take advantage of this instrument. Again, it's only partially covering financial liabilities in the provisioning fund. So it's only 50% of the amounts for the private sector window that are put aside in this provisioning fund. It means that the risk needs to be managed. So when you provide a grant, even if there is a loss, the grant is provided and there is basically a commitment made. But for the guarantees, it means that at all times, the Commission needs to be sure, and it needs to have at least 90% certainty that the money that is in the provisioning fund is enough to actually meet the obligations under the guarantee. Otherwise, imagine if there are higher obligations, suddenly they would be disrupting the normal implementation of the EU budget. And as I mentioned, this is irrevocable guarantee. So the Commission cannot say, oh, you know, I'm not going to pay because these obligations are higher. No, I mean, it's irrevocable. It needs to be honored. As a result, processes have been put in place to manage the risk associated with budgetary guarantees. What I want to emphasize here is that while we like talking about how operations are proposed and approved, in reality, risk management is probably the most important part of managing budgetary guarantees. And to manage risk under budgetary guarantees so that at all times, the Commission has 90% certainty the risk is not exceeded and the liquidity in the provisioning fund is sufficient. There is a guarantee risk expert group called GTAC Plus now for the new period, which is supporting the Commission in assessing risk, in monitoring risk. It includes experts that are seconded from the development finance institutions that are also supporting the Commission in implementing the guarantee. These are risk experts. It can also include experts seconded from member states. This group is hosted in at the European Commission headquarters, and it's basically serving the two DGs that are responsible for overseeing the implementation of budgetary guarantees. So both INTPA and DG NEAR are supported by this group of guarantee risk experts.
Perhaps, sorry, Magdalena, to interrupt you. Perhaps we should have a kind of, a small session about assets and liabilities management in the banking sector. That would, that would be something else, I mean, like very short introduction. How do you manage, out of non-liabilities, or yes, assets, liabilities, and then how the whole structure of guarantee works, because perhaps we have participants who are not fully, familiar with the banking sector and the whole structure.
Yes, it's a good question, Thomas, and thank you. I mean, you have excellent questions. I hope we have time to go deeper into some of these aspects.
Let's see if we can get this time. Let's see. Yes. I'm muting myself right now. Just a kind of observation.
So let me maybe introduce the life cycle, the typical life cycle of the guarantee process, and then we could then go back and discuss the issue of liabilities and how it works. Because again, risk management or managing the risk associated with guarantees is probably one of the most important features of budgetary guarantees. So I think it is necessary that we go back to this question. But first, because this is an open access guarantee for private sector operation that can be implemented with a variety of implementing partners, as I mentioned, it is done using investment windows. There were 5 investment windows in the previous period, so under the EFSD, and now in the new investment period, there are 6 investment windows. Having investment windows is under this open access guarantee is very important because it means that there would be variety of programs across the window. So it's not going to be just in one sector. Going back to the question that Thomas asked about risk, if all the programs suddenly are in energy, then there would be a lot of concentration and exposure to risk in the energy sector, which, well, currently is quite it's quite a challenging situation in the energy sector. So having the investment windows means that the risk can be diversified across sectors. These segment sectors or areas of focus for the guarantees in the period 21-27 correspond, broadly speaking, to the policy priorities and to the investment needs that have been discussed. There was a process as to how to come up with these windows, but I want to say here, these are very, very broadly defined windows. And so it's not like they're very specific. These are very broadly defined. I think nobody can disagree that these are very important areas. The question is what kind of programs, projects operations would be then supported under these windows. So let me very quickly run through the windows, and then we can discuss a bit more how actually the implementation process takes place. So first of all, number one, the first window is on connectivity, and that window supports the green transition plans, so investments in greening and energy sector, also investments in energy efficiency in production process, for instance. It also supports, so this is for energy, it also supports transport, whether it's by air, by road, by rail, or inland waterways. It can also include logistics centers, for instance. It also supports digital connectivity investments, which foster the digital economy. And I think with the COVID-19 period, we saw also how important this is and the needs also to improve digital inclusion. So the focus is on energy, transport, digital, broadly speaking, variety of operations and proposals can be submitted under this window. There is also a window on MSME finance. A similar window also existed under the previous EFSD, and this is quite known to Turkey, the variety of programs, mechanisms in Turkey in terms of extending access to finance for MSMEs at the various stages of their development. I think what's interesting for this window also is that it includes a focus also on digitalization and greening of businesses, as well as underserved target groups, women-led or youth SMEs, SMEs in rural areas. A window that is probably of interest, high interest to Turkey is sustainable cities, which supports investments in sustainable and green urban development, whether this is urban resilience or whether it's urban growth, economic opportunities. I think under this window, significant opportunities exist also for Turkey, and there were also experiences from the previous EFSD. There was a similar window there as well in terms of encouraging public-private partnerships and crowding in some of the private capital for sustainable urban development. The fourth window is on sustainable agriculture, biodiversity, forests, and water. Again, a lot of focus areas are bundled under this window, but broadly speaking, it is a window that looks into food value chains, reduction of food wastes, risks with climate risks and adaptation to climate risks, investments in agriculture, for instance. Also, biodiversity is becoming a significant priority area, and more focus is put on biodiversity issues, forests, water investments, especially for affordable water sanitation access. So, but it can also include, for instance, the blue economy, oceans, the fisheries. So a lot of opportunities in this window, I think also. Probably it's interesting also here because sustainability is becoming important for integration into European value chains. So taking these advantages of this window can also improve opportunities for export-oriented businesses. The fifth window is on sustainable finance. This is a new window. It did not exist under the previous EFSD. It aims to really contribute to bridging this financing gap for sustainable development and the Paris objectives by mobilizing private investment at scale. Yesterday, Valeria mentioned the 2.5 billion financing gap, trillion, sorry, annually. However, this is much higher currently after the COVID-19 period. And this financing gap cannot be closed by the available resources. However, if we had time, we could even do a little, question and answer session to discuss what really the size of capital markets is globally. But from a very quick research I did, I think the top 10 asset managers globally right now manage over 30 trillion of assets. So if you look at the financing gap and you look at the size of capital markets, it's not that the capital is not available. It's a question of directing part of this capital to sustainable financing objectives. There is more interest in business in terms of being aligned to sustainability and the so-called ESG commitments coming from businesses. There is a lot of pressure these days also to show alignment. And as a result of this, I think this sustainable finance window can be an opportunity to pilot innovative financial mechanisms, specifically capital market instruments to crowd in some of this finance. Here, the focus could be on innovative financial instruments such as green bonds. There is significant growth of the green bond market. Blue bonds that have been used to refinance existing debt and use the margin to reinvest in the blue economy, into conservation efforts as well, ocean conservation, social or gender bonds, and other sustainability-related instruments. There is a Team Europe initiative actually for a centralized vehicle that could have investments from the European Development Finance institutions that can be backed using the EFSD Plus Guarantee. And that fund is aimed at making investments in green bonds, especially issued by sovereign or sub-sovereign entities. This is important because of this signaling effect of this commitment of the public sector in terms of investing in green infrastructure. And the needs for investment are huge. If this vehicle is developed, I think the EFSD Plus Guarantee could have a very important demonstration effect, backing up such vehicle. And we'll see if the development finance institutions would make a proposal as part of this process under this window. I think it's also very important to say that this window is probably the biggest opportunity in terms of operations in Turkey for EFSD. And the reason is it's really about markets that can have the capacity to introduce such innovative instruments. So it's not least developed countries. It needs to be countries that have the infrastructure, that have the capacity. And these are countries, I know that in Turkey there is already work on a green bond standard. At EU level, there is work on a European green bond standard. I know also in some of the neighborhood countries, specifically in the East, there is interest in developing this green bond segment. So I think sustainable finance is a significant opportunity. It's also a cross-sectoral window, so it's not focused on one sector. It can support a wide range of investments, whether it's renewable energy, energy efficiency, water management, land use, forestry, a wide range of investments because across the green sectors. So that is a significant opportunity, and that can be discussed more. Finally, there is the human development window. There was a health platform under the first EFSD that played a very important role in the response to COVID-19 in terms of procurement of future vaccines for partner countries. So this human development window can build on these experiences to support investment, specifically in health, but also not just health. It can also go in wider areas such as education, TVET, social protection, social services. So broadly speaking, these are the 6 windows under which proposals are expected. And so if these are the broad windows, and I want to just describe how the process would then work. First of all, the first step is always agreeing on these windows. So there were discussions, there were strategic orientations which were adopted by the EFSD Plus strategic board. There was also discussion in the operational board in the various regional investment platforms, including the Turkey investment platform. So this is just to agree on the broad outline of these investment windows. As I presented them, they're really quite wide and broad. Currently, the first call is launched. So this is a call to the implementing partners of the EFSD guarantee to submit investment proposals under this window. So this was already launched in April. And I expect, at least 3 months period for these proposals to flow back. So these are proposed investment programs. Again, they're not focused on a specific project or a specific operation. They are investment programs that are in response to the windows, and they're likely to include, in variety of cases, their scope could be global, because I mentioned the instrument has global scope. However, there could be also some earmarking or prioritization, even under a global proposal for a specific region. I expect also proposals, significant numbers of proposals also for the near regions, so the European neighborhood, for the enlargement countries, for Turkey, but not specifically for Turkey. That's not how normally it works. Normally, again, I mentioned it works as a program, and as a program that can draw on investments and operations in a variety of countries. This is basically necessary for diversification of risks. It's also necessary for providing flexibility. It's also good for replication across countries. So these broad investment programs normally are not focused in a specific country. So then, after these investment programs are submitted in response to the call, they would be assessed using some criteria, and the usual criteria, as you can imagine, are linked to policy. So how they respond to the policy priorities, to the investment needs, how they respond to the geographic needs, how they respond to the criteria for additionality. And very importantly, and coming back to the question that Thomas raised, how actually they respond to the risk appetite, because you need to look at this as a portfolio of investment programs. In the first EFSD, there were 45 proposals, and out of them only 28 were approved. And the approved proposals, all of them as a package, need to respond to the appetite for risk. So some of them would be riskier, some of them would be less risky, so that the risk can be balanced across them. And on average, the EU would remain within the risk appetite for the amount that is in the provisioning fund for the EFSD guarantee. So there would be risk assessments as part of the assessments of the proposed investment program. After this, there is a discussion usually in an operational board meeting. In this case, for Turkey, it's a Turkey investment platform for programs that include Turkey. And the operational board in this case is supporting the Commission in terms of the implementation of the guarantee program. So it will provide opinion for the PIPs, so the proposed investment programs that will be that will be approved, that will be agreed, and the guarantee allocation to them. So this is likely to take place towards the end of the year. And after there is a positive opinion in the operational boards under the various regional investment platforms, then the Commission will negotiate the guarantee agreements with the implementing financial institutions. This would probably start to take place towards the end of the year and beginning of next year. I also wanted to mention that there were 28 investment programs that were approved under the previous period, so under the EFSD. However, only 18 of them were signed. There were some very innovative programs, but they were not signed as signed guarantee agreements. And the reason is, well, you can guess, it's the COVID-19 period, and the EFSD had to be recalibrated to respond to the priorities that were coming, that were emerging from the COVID-19 period. So some of these programs could provide the basis for new investment proposals in this new period. Secondly, some of the existing programs are already showing a lot of good results, and there could be requests to top them up or to expand them to additional countries and regions so that they could be replicated. So I think this next period would really build on these experiences, and in terms of also the structures, the guarantees that were deemed successful in the previous period. So just very briefly how it works. As I mentioned, once there is a positive opinion, then there would be a negotiation of the actual guarantee agreement. And when I say negotiation, it is really a negotiation because this is not a template agreement. There are policy issues that need to be addressed with each partner. The structure of the guarantee is different in each case. So it's a lengthy process that would lead to a draft agreement that is also subject to internal consultation between the various commission services. And once this is agreed, then this is now the signed guarantee agreement. Only after that, the implementing partner can start implementing the guarantee, and they would have a period of time to actually line up operations and investments. This period is called a ramp-up period or an implementation period. Normally it's 3 years. It can be extended to 5 years. This period is very important because this is the period when the development finance institutions that implement the guarantee would actually sign the investment agreements for the operations that they want to support using the guarantee. So only at that time, basically, there would be actual pipeline of projects under the guarantee. That's very different from blending. So every time a development finance institution finds a new investment opportunity during this period of 3 to 5 years, they make a notification to the commission. This is called an inclusion notice. In that notification, they describe the elements of their transaction and the level of coverage from the Fsd Plus Guarantee. The inclusion notice is very important because they might have 10 transactions under one investment program, under one signed guarantee agreement, but they can never exceed the cover that is under this guarantee agreement. So there is always need to make this notice and to make sure that the cover provided by the guarantee is not exceeded. There is also regular reporting, as I mentioned, financial reports. They would also include reporting on risk, because the risk will have to continue to be monitored during the whole life cycle of implementation. And based on this information that is shared by the implementation partners, there is then discussion in the various operational boards and in the EFSD Plus strategic board in terms of implementation of the signed guarantee agreements, the outlook, the operations, the investments, the pipelines. So that's the implementation process. That's how it looks like. And before I give you some concrete examples, we still have a few minutes. Before I give concrete examples of actual guarantee structures, trying to respond also to the questions that Thomas raised, I want to briefly, just for general understanding, I'm sure that the banking experts in the room are well familiar with this terminology, but just to make sure we are on the same page here, just to emphasize, when we talk about guarantees, they're broadly speaking 3 ways a guarantee can be provided. First of all, it could be a first loss guarantee. In this case, if the commission gives a first loss guarantee, it assumes the first loss, either it's on an individual loan or on a portfolio of loans, right? But the first loss, let's say up to 20 or up to 30%, is assumed in this case by the commission, so by the guarantee. However, in this case, you see the little blue box. The commission expects that the implementing development partner would also have a share of the risk. So the commission wouldn't like to be alone in the first loss. It would always like to share the risk of the first loss with the implementing partner, because they implement the guarantee, and if they also have, they are also exposed to the same level of risk, the likelihood of them implementing it with the risk parameters of the Commission is much higher. Then the residual loss is covered by the implementing development finance institution and their counterparts. So this is the first loss guarantee. The second loss guarantee is similar, but in that case, somebody else takes the first loss. It could be a financial counterpart. And then the second loss is provided through the EFSD Plus Guarantee. So this is the mezzanine tranche, basically. And then any residual losses can also be then assumed by the financial counterpart institutions. Then I think what's interesting is there are a couple of structures that existed from the EFSD with the so-called pari passu guarantee. It's a term, it's a Latin term, but it means, as you can see in the box, it means that everybody is on equal footing, right? Everybody assumes the same level of risk. So they take equal part in the risk. And I'm explaining this because in the next period, what we would likely want to see is more of this mezzanine, so second loss guarantees, and more of this equal sharing of the risk guarantees, and less of the.
Now, sorry to interrupt you. Can I just have one question? Could you please elaborate this pari passu principle to the way how we in the EU countries also look from the state aid perspective, because that's important. Because pari passu is not like, okay, always 50-50, but it's also about, it's a part of a broader state aid regime as well.
Yes, in this case, it's really on equal footing, and state aid rules do not apply. So if it's a question of risk on a loan, for instance, there was a question about a loan yesterday. For instance, assume a development finance institution provides a loan to a project. If the guarantee provided by the European Commission is a pari passu guarantee, then the risk on this loan can be shared 50-50 by the development finance institution and the EFSD Plus Guarantee. So it's about sharing the risk on a specific financial instruments that is supported by the EFSD Guarantee. Maybe, Thomas, in the next slide, actually, this will be I think, easier to see. Because here I wanted just to describe the different guarantee structures that can be supported using the EFSD Plus Guarantee. Because, sometimes it's a bit confusing. We're talking about an EFSD guarantee, so you think it's only a guarantee, right? But it's actually not, because it's a budgetary guarantee provided to a partner financial institution. But the partner financial institution can have a variety of operations. So it can support risk for loans. So that's the example that I just gave. But it could be also that the partner financial institution provides a guarantee to a local financial intermediary on a portfolio of loans of such local financial intermediary. So it can be used to support the risk on guarantees. It could be also used to support the risk on counter guarantees. In this case, imagine a national development bank, national promotional bank, or a guarantee fund, Turkish guarantee fund, provide a guarantee to local financial institutions for their lending for specific objectives, let's say green SMEs. So they could also receive a counter guarantee to the guarantee they provide using the EFSD Plus Guarantee. In that case, also the risk on providing this guarantee will be reduced. Very importantly, it can also be used to de-risk capital market instruments. And I mentioned the sustainable finance window. There are opportunities for Turkey under it. What it means is, for instance, in a capital market instrument, very often it's necessary to have an anchor investor. If there is a development finance institution that invests in, let's say, a green bond issue, then it's a very important signal to the market that this green bond, let's say, issued on the local market is sound, right? So that investment could be backed by a guarantee, by EFSD Plus Guarantee. But there could be also private, we want to have private capital, institutional investors investing in this capital market instrument, green bond. So the EFSD Plus could also be provided as to share the risk of private investors in this capital market instrument. And this is something that has been used for some of the innovative bonds that I mentioned, such as a blue bond for the ocean economy, to provide a better credit margin compared to the market rate for these innovative instruments. It can also support equity and quasi-equity participations. So imagine a development finance institution invests in a fund, but that investment can be backed by EFSD Plus Guarantee, or it could be also protection to private investors in the fund. So a wide variety of structures are possible, and this is why it is always necessary to have this alignment of interest. And when I speak about alignment of interest, it's not just with the counterparty financial institution, but it's also down the line. It's also with the investors in this fund. It's also with the local financial institution that provides the lending, because nobody wants to end up with the bad apples, right? I mean, it's about risk sharing. It's not about assuming all the risk. And I mentioned also it's a remunerated instrument because some of this remuneration would then flow back to the provisioning fund and would allow the Commission to take more risk. Without the liquidity in the provisioning fund, then the risk appetite would be much more limited. Of course, there are possibilities for some reductions in pricing. And I mentioned also, just as a footnote, under the sovereign operations window, of course, these operations are not priced. So this is the general part of the presentation, and I still have a bit of time. I could also see questions are coming, and I think I have few slides which are very illustrative, just 3-4 slides. Allow me to go very quickly through them. These are just some examples, and I'm using mostly the experiences from the first EFSD to just give you a flavor of the kind of structures that we have seen coming under the first EFSD. I just want to make one caveat. Some of the more innovative structures, as I mentioned, under the first EFSD, at the end of the day, could not be implemented. They did not lead to signed agreement. However, they were approved as investment programs. So hopefully they would be reintroduced with, of course, modifications in this new call because of this focus on innovative financial products. So the first example is the example that is, I think, very familiar to everybody in the room. It's an intermediated lending example. This is meant for SMEs. There were a variety of guarantees under the first EFSD that were meant to support, to extend access to finance to SMEs, whether it's for financial inclusion purposes, so for unserved, underserved target groups, or for access to finance to SMEs more generally, or in some cases, there were target groups such as agribusinesses, such as rural enterprises, so enterprises in rural areas. I mentioned green SMEs, women-led youth. So these guarantees always work in a very similar way. There is a guarantee agreement between the Commission and the lead financial institution, and then the lead financial institution provides usually a credit line and a guarantee to partner financial institutions. It could be also just a guarantee, the credit line is not mandatory. It really depends on the needs of the partner financial institution in terms of the type of financing they require, the maturity of the lending, because sometimes they have enough local finance, but they can't provide loans at long enough maturity. So it really depends on these individual discussions. However, what I wanted to mention here is that there were some examples, interesting examples for agribusiness, for instance. This is the so-called Greenify program of AFD and Proparco, or for target groups such as internally displaced people, refugees, returnees, uncertain groups such as women-led youth, in which also the risk was shared with the local financial institutions. In these structures, remember, I showed the second loss guarantee. In these structures, basically, the Commission assumed the second loss. And that is very important. And in the next period, we expect more of such structures. So not what we call plain vanilla guarantees, because there are plenty of instruments that can provide plain vanilla guarantees, but really guarantees which are more customized, targeted to specific target needs, target groups and their needs. Second example I wanted to provide is when the EFSD Plus Guarantee can be used for a direct guarantee to a beneficiary. This could be a corporate, it could be a public utility, it could be a sub-sovereign, it could be a variety of examples, it could be a project. The way it works again is there is a guarantee agreement with the lead financial institution, and then the lead financial institution provides a loan, whether it's a project finance to a special purpose vehicle, whether it's a loan to a corporate, for instance, for investments in energy efficiency. This guarantee is sharing part of the risk on the loan. What is interesting here is that what the Commission would like to see is not just that the German finance institution provides such loan, but there is also co-lending by private sector, and that's usually a local financial institution. So the guarantee can be used to protect also to part of their risk, right? It's not just the risk of the development finance institution that implements the guarantee, and the structures that are usually used is, they could be syndicated lending, they could be parallel lending between the two institutions, but they could also share some of the due diligence of providing this lending. This instrument, this structure is quite useful for infrastructure investments. It has been used also for sub-sovereign kind of operations. So of course it requires larger size of lending, of loans, otherwise going through the local financial institutions is much more appropriate. And the guarantee is usually capped at around 20% of the loan. However, it can also be capped at the combination of all loans that are provided to all possible beneficiaries. So it could be 20% on each loan, but no more than 20% on the portfolio of all loans for all projects provided under this guarantee. Again, it's meant to share the risk, not assume all the risk. Another structure I wanted to explain is investment in a fund. So, the EU could do investments in funds by providing risk capital under blending. That's one option, in which the EU basically subscribes the C shares, the first loss tranche. Yesterday, Valeria gave some example of Fsd, the European Fund for Southeast Europe. Example is for Green for Growth Fund. These are structured funds in which a first loss tranche is subscribed by the European Commission. Very important, because then this first loss tranche can mobilize additional finance by public finance institutions in the mezzanine tranche and by private investors also. However, with a budgetary guarantee, a similar result can be achieved. And it can be achieved by providing a guarantee that shares part of the risk of the public financial institution that invests in the fund, as well as private investors in the fund. So it shares the risk of the investors of the fund only, and some of the funding expenses linked to the fund. Of course, it's not providing protection for profits in the fund, but if an investor in the fund has a guarantee that partially shares the risk to invest in a fund, of course, there will be more interest from private capital in terms of coming in as investors in such funds. So this is very important instrument. It has been used for impact funds, for private equity, venture capital funds. It can really stimulate, mobilize private finance in fund structures that are managed with fund managers. I also wanted to provide a similar example of fund of funds. In this case, there is a blended pool in which there is a guarantee that is used for risk protection in the first loss and then funding in the second loss of the fund. And this blended pool is used to invest in a variety of other funds. So it's fund of funds because the structure then can be used to invest in other funds, which then in turn, these funds then invest in their target groups, in this case, socially driven SMEs. That's another structure. And this is some of the structures that have been used for the sustainable energy investments, particularly. This is, again, I mean, let's not forget the target region was Sub-Saharan Africa, the neighborhood. A lot of the risk is associated with the payment on investments in private renewable energy projects. So the independent power producers would likely be more interested in such projects, private sector projects, if there is a bit more certainty on the payments to them. And it's the same also on the public utility side, that is also purchasing the, the produced energy. So the guarantee, this is an example of the European Guarantee for Renewable Energy. It's a joint platform of several European development finance institutions, including EIB, CDP, which is the Italian Development Finance Institution, KfW, the German one, AFD, the French one. This platform has used several financial guarantees that were supported by the EFSD. One of these guarantees, for instance, provides this protection to the payment from the public utility to the IPP, to the independent power producer. It means that it can be used, for instance, so that directly to the project, but it can also be provided to a financial intermediary, for instance, for letter of credit, to ensure financing in turn when there is no payment of obligations by the, by the public utility. It provides a cash reserve in a way, right? A cushion for this IPP investor. This guarantee has been used by AFD, for instance, in Mozambique as part of a program that meant to encourage private renewable energy developers, and it was included in the package, so they could have access to this guarantee to increase their interest in developing such projects. So this is one example of a sustainable energy guarantee. Again, there are many more examples, but this is just to give you a flavor that EFSD and EFSD Plus Guarantee can be used in a variety of scenarios to share risks and crowd in additional capital. I want to stop here, and I believe questions and answers are coming. What we wanted to do with Valeria is actually to have the coffee break. After the coffee break, a very short kind of practical insight session, and then leave time for more questions and answers on these budgetary guarantees. But as I still have maybe 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes.
Can I have a question, please? Magdalena, you have just mentioned the case of Mozambique, about renewables. How does this, how this kind of guarantee can work against really investment projects and vis-a-vis the policy? Because that's the most important. You have underlined, you both with Valeria have underlined in the last couple of days that there has to be a policy connection, People are in different countries, investors in different countries are thinking about renewables, green energy, and so forth. But then when it comes to reality, there is a boom, like you hit a fender of the car in front of you, in principle. There is a backlog. There is
and the backlog is mostly due to
how much you have to. How much you have to prove that your project in principle is in line with the EU policies. Okay, I mean, okay, green energy is...
You don't have to prove that. Yes, I see. I understand the question. It's not that you need, as an investor, you need to prove that. Normally what happens is that the investment windows are designed so they can meet these overall priorities Secondly, the guarantee agreement, when it is signed, has criteria as to the kind of operations and investments that can be selected. So there would be criteria for the kind of final beneficiaries, for the kind of SMEs, just put an example, for the kind of projects, for the size of loan to a project, for the kind of fund that can be invested in. So there are these criteria that come in the guarantee agreement. And once this is agreed, it is then up to the implementing partner to go and find such projects and operations. So it is really giving them the flexibility, because let's be frank, policy aspirations are policy aspirations, but there is also a reality on the market. So it is really giving them the flexibility to work with the reality in the market and use this instrument to do more than they otherwise could. However, what I want to say here on your question specifically, Thomas, is it's very important that the guarantee agreements come not just with risk sharing, but also with technical assistance. That's very important, because you're very right. The issue is often it's not the availability of instrument. The instrument is available, but the uptake could be very low, and the low uptake could be due, to technical capacities to develop good quality projects. So technical assistance is very useful. In this case, with energy, there is technical assistance to help prepare good quality projects that can then use the guarantee. I think it's time for the coffee break. I don't want to keep everyone. Meanwhile, I will take a look at the questions and I will do my best to answer them after the coffee break. Let's break for 15 minutes and come back at 11 o'clock.
Thank you, Magdalena.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. I want to give just 1 more minute, just in case. And then we can start. Lisa, Thomas, we start?
Yes, we can.
I think we can start. We have 123 participants right now registered on the network, so it's a better attendance than in the morning hours, early morning hours. Let's go for it.
Thanks a lot. I just want to, the way we want to run this final session is, first, let me take the opportunity to answer some of the questions that came through the chat box. Then we really want to have a bit of time in which we can share some practical insights, really also, recap on what we discussed yesterday and today, and then probably also have a bit more time for questions and answers at the end. So looking at the questions that came so far through the chat box, and thanks a lot, these are very good questions. It's first of all about the operational board of the Turkey investment platform. So, I mean, I mentioned there are regional investment platforms, and those are built on the blending platforms that existed before, but there is more focus now on harmonization across these regional approaches. Turkey is not a voting member in the operational board, however, is just an observer. Well, yes, that is correct. I wouldn't call it just an observer. I think the observer status is very important. EFSD Plus is managed by the European Commission. I mentioned the issue of risk. I mentioned the existence of a centralized risk management group, and even that risk management group is not composed of EU officials. It has seconded experts from the European Development Finance institutions. So it's a collaborative effort. It's a new instrument that requires new capacities, and it's not possible to govern it in the same way that is done for grants, for instance. Again, it's just one of the tools, but not the only tool. So the operational board is important because it means that Turkey will have an opportunity to provide an opinion on the investment programs that would be proposed. And again, just because an investment program is proposed doesn't mean that there will be actual operations in Turkey. I think this is the main difference from blending and the main difference from grants. So it is really about Turkey being very active and proactive in terms of making sure it takes advantages of these programs. So it will participate as an observer. It will be able to provide an opinion. The programs would be approved. There is a guarantee allocation provided to them. And from there, it's really about implementation, finding the operations, finding the investments. And that's really the driving seat for this is on the ground, whoever is on the ground. So the situation in Western Balkans, there is, as you know, there is NDICI, so this is the new neighborhood development and international cooperation instrument, Global Europe, that governs external action in 21-27 period, and that's complemented by HIPAA 3 regulation. And under the EFSD Plus, the countries that are under HIPAA 3 are also eligible to participate. So there, as a result, there is, however, all of this architecture is built on existing facilities. So as a result, what happened is there is an EFSD strategic board, sorry, EFSD Plus, right? I mean, we are in the EFSD Plus period. There is a EFSD Plus strategic board that includes also Turkey, and there is EFSD EFSD Plus strategic board that is for the Western Balkans. However, the same strategic orientations were approved in the two structures. So materially, there are no differences, but the structures are different because, again, there is the Western Balkan Investment Framework that existed as the facility, the regional facility, and it could be built upon, while Turkey, now with the Turkey Investment Platform, has the opportunity to create its own platform. And in terms of the strategic board level, it is under the overall EFSD Plus board. Now, in terms of the operational board, it is an operational board under the Turkish Investment Platform, and there is an operational board under the WBF as well. And you know, under the WBF, it's a fund. It has bilateral partners, it has the European Commission, so there is a steering committee there. What I can say is that for EFSD Plus, the situation in terms of governance, so that is in terms of governance for the budgetary guarantees exactly as for Turkey. There are no differences in the strategic operational board between the two platforms. The idea is to allow for harmonization. However, there are specificities for WBF in terms of the actual platform WBF, which is used specifically for Western Balkans, blending operations, and I think Valeria will talk a bit more about it in the next few minutes. Secondly, in terms of applying how the implementing partners, so yes, the Commission launched a call in April 2022 based on the investment windows. And the eligible financial institutions, international financial institutions, are expected to propose concrete investment proposals. These eligible financial institutions are already known because they have undergone an assessment process, the 7 pillars that we discussed. It's quite a complex process where their internal control systems, their auditing systems, their risk management systems were already screened and approved so they can manage budgetary guarantees. So what is happening now is that these pre-screened and approved implementing partners for the EFSD Plus budgetary guarantee will make investment proposals. And some of these investment proposals will then be approved, then guarantee agreements will be signed, and then, only then, they will start looking for investments and operations. It is at that time that Turkish public and private institutions would become the natural counterparts of the development finance institutions that implement the guarantee. And I showed some of the structures. These are intermediated structures that would work through Turkish public and private institutions. That is one specific example. The second example is specifically for Turkish public institutions. Of course, it is the very important role in terms of participating in these discussions through the operational board. But also, I think in terms of consultations, there would be evaluations processes, there would be stakeholder consultations. So there would be engagement and discussions throughout this process. In terms of a very good question, and that is on the pari passu risk-sharing principle, and whether it can be applied to equity-type products, or it's possible under the debt-type products. Normally, where we see it is under debt-type products, because it is where the risk is naturally, it can be shared, a risk on a credit line or risk on a loan. For equity, in a project finance structure, the promoter is expected to put their own equity in reality. And it is only then the guarantee shares the risk on a loan that is provided either by a local commercial bank or by development financial institution or both. So I think the pari passu principle is really not for equity type products, it's really more for debt type products. And there was a very good question, and that is a question around innovative financial instruments, gender and social bonds. So the principles for social bonds are already established. These are established by ECMA, the international, it's an international institution for capital markets, that they have adopted the principles for issuing social bonds. And the social bonds work in a similar way, I would say, to green bonds, but they're meant to support projects. So the projects the use of the proceeds of this bond. So if you issue a bond, then the proceeds of this bond would then be invested in for social objectives. In this case, this could be investments linked to, affordable housing, for instance, would fall under this. Microfinance institutions would fall under this. I would say also health, education objectives would fall under this. So the difference is that the use of proceeds of these bonds is for social purposes. And this is based on very strict guidelines that were issued by the International Capital Market Association in terms of how to issue a social bond. Because there is need for a framework of criteria, there is need for monitoring, reporting processes so that investors in such bond are really assured that the proceeds are really used for the purposes, for the social purposes and not for something else. I don't call it social washing, but for green bonds, for sure, it's something we speak about. It's greenwashing. And how do we avoid greenwashing? It requires having this framework and having bonds issued according to standards. For gender bonds, they are using the same principles as for the social bonds, so the same International Capital Market Association guidelines. However, the differences here is that these are bonds usually by businesses which are directed by women, and they're meant for operations which are serving women, and they respect the principle of gender equality. So that's how it differentiates. And then if I could add green bonds here to this excellent question, they are standards issued by the Climate Bond Initiative and also the same International Capital Market Association around the use of proceeds, around the reporting frameworks. And there is also, of course, work on the new EU Green Bond standard that is also aligned to the EU taxonomy. So that's how this overall works for capital market instruments. And then maybe just the last question, and it is around the InvestEU investment windows and the products there. Yes, well, I think there are, and we discussed this a bit yesterday, there are differences between InvestEU and EFSD Plus, because at the end of the day, the objectives are different. When it comes to EFSD Plus, it's an instrument that works globally in external action of the European Union. So it can work across a variety of regions. Asia, Pacific, Sub-Saharan Africa, neighborhood, Turkey, Western Balkans. I mean, as you can see, the investment needs, the level of development of the various countries is very different. I mean, it ranges across the board. So it's not possible to have a one-size-fits-all approach. As a result, I think under the EFSD and now EFSD Plus, there is this very great prominence of the open access window, especially for private sector operations, because it is not possible that there is only one development finance institution that works across all these geographies and markets. The reality is the EU external action combines the effort of the European Commission and all these various European development finance institutions, bigger ones, smaller ones. They all have their geographical focus, their policy areas, priority areas, their area of specialism. And this is why there are a variety of implementing partners starting already from the first EFSD. Why under EFSI, initially, the European Fund for Strategic Investments, and now under InvestEU, the main burden is really carried by EIB and the European Investment Fund, being, the EU bank, right? So only now under InvestEU, 25% is expected of InvestEU to be implemented by, additional partners, multilateral such as EBRD, or some of the national promotional banks if they meet the criteria. So that is a difference between the two instruments, which is explained, I think, by the different objectives and goals. But in terms of financial products, I think, again, we're talking about the budgetary guarantee in both cases, and the budgetary guarantee can can cover a wide range of financial products. And if you look at it, the windows, there are priorities under the windows for InvestEU, which are similar to the priorities under EFSD Plus windows, but there are also differences, like for instance, focus on innovation research under InvestEU. It's not really a priority as much under the under EFSD Plus, because again, objectives are different, overarching policy priorities are different. I hope I answered this question. I don't see more questions. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. So if you allow us just to spare a few minutes now to just really dive a bit into some of the practicalities in relation to the two instruments that we're discussing, the EFSD Plus Guarantee and blending. I just want to, I think this is quite clear, but I want to make sure that we start this session having this information in mind. First of all, I think it's very clear blending and technical assistance and investment grants, these are not new modalities. These are modalities, blending started already in 2007, and grants and technical assistance is the main modality in terms of external action, in terms of development cooperation in the EU budget. What's new is the budgetary guarantee, which was piloted under the EFSD 2017-2020, and which is now being expanded significantly under 21-27 period. And some of the things which were possible before under blending can now be done under the EFSD Plus Guarantee. So I just wanted to highlight some of the similarities and some of the differences. First of all, under blending, as we discussed yesterday, it is really cash-based support. There is transfer of cash. There is transfer of money, of funding, because there is commitment of funding. While for the EFSD, the support is unfunded. There is a reserve in a provisioning fund that can only be called upon if there are losses. As a result, the leverage that can be achieved with the EFSD Plus Guarantee is much higher. The innovation here is that the EU is using the weight of its budget and its reputation, its AAA rating, to be able to provide a budgetary guarantee without having to use to book all this money, to keep all this money in its pockets. While for blending, it's limited resources, money is committed, and that's what's available. So I think that's really a significant difference. Secondly, the blending projects are approved at operational level. They're approved for specific projects and operations, while for EFSD budgetary guarantee, what we are discussing is an approval of an investment program that can then lead to a portfolio of projects and operations. The idea is coming from the financing for development discussion, that there are all these huge investment gaps for the SDGs, and the development finance institutions need to do more. The private sector finance needs to participate more. And how do we do this? Really, it's to enable the public finance institutions to do more, to do things which are riskier, which are more innovative, which are better customized, targeting new areas, new sectors. That is the portfolio approach that is under the EFSD Plus Guarantee. And it's also a multi-country approach, as I mentioned. It's a regional approach. It's not for a specific country. The operations could be across a region. So the proposed programs that I expect personally to see under this call now under EFSD Plus for the NEAR regions could include the whole NEAR region. So it could be all the countries that are under DG NEAR. It could be just for part of NEAR. So it could be just for enlargement countries, just for the South neighborhood, or just for the East neighborhood. Or what we've seen in the past is also South neighborhood is also prominent in some of the proposals for Sub-Saharan Africa. Or we can also have global proposals that would include Turkey. So, it's a multi-country regional approach. It's not for a specific country. And again, it's remunerated because there is this risk management that is very important feature, while the blending operations are not priced, but there are some fees that are paid for managing the operations. I think the advantages are different. For blending, it's really, it's policy impact driven. It is very best suited for very nascent markets, non-existent markets or sectors, very innovative, untested solutions, and very country-specific actions, right? Yesterday, we spoke a bit about the additionality principle, and there are so many criteria how to define additionality, but one of them is innovation and making sure that through a blending grant, there are higher quality projects that otherwise would be possible, especially for new technologies, very strong demonstration effect. And then once this is demonstrated under a blending operation, it can be scaled up, it can be replicated through an EFSD Plus guarantee. So I think that's where also the difference is. The guarantees are more suitable for developing markets and sectors, but not really for very nascent, non-existing markets, because there will be no private sector operation. They're really geared towards market-driven operations, market-driven mechanisms and instruments. So there should be some sort of a market that has gaps that can be scaled up. And it's also very suitable for solutions that are replicable and can be scaled up, scalable solutions with very strong market development, market formation effect. It's more cost-effective instrument, and in terms of how it's managed and in terms of the crowding in effect that is achieved. So that's briefly speaking, I think, in terms of the two instruments. And maybe Valeria, you would like to take it over from here. Should I stop sharing the slides or?
You may go ahead with the same if you don't mind. I mean, there are just few.
Would you like me to share?
Or do you want that I?
No, I'll be happy to change them for you. Just need to guide
me. Yes, you go ahead with this. Okay, thank you, Maddalena. Very briefly, we said yesterday that we may show some examples with the blending. And in this case, to give some examples and with the sort of bottom-up approach, I mean, not seeing from the Commission side, but from the beneficiary country side. From the Commission side, of course, it is key to be able with the blending to increase the size of investments, but to increase the size of the global size of investments in line with the EU priorities. And also, as it was stressed several times, the quality of the investment is key, and the quality means that the investment is not only additional, but is well prepared, and this is where the technical assistance came into play. And of course, about the blending, it is also the aspect of combining the grant with the risk sharing. We go to the next, please. Thank you. Now, from the point of view of the beneficiary country or beneficiary countries, now I will clarify why I say this. For the beneficiary country, we have seen that top down, there is the European Commission, then there are financial intermediaries. They can be international or national financial intermediaries. And then there is the beneficiary, and the beneficiary is the beneficiary country is the one generating the investments. So if one wants to look at the bottom-up approach, how the beneficiary country will propose investments that can be considered by the financial intermediaries and then go up through an approval process. In the Western Balkans countries, the mechanism is the single project pipeline. So each country in the Western Balkans has a single project pipeline where there are all the investments in the pipeline. And then, and this is a key aspect, they are generally prioritized in a national investment committee. So this is a mechanism that is established in each of the Western Balkan countries. Another aspect that Magdalena underlined is that blending, as well as budgetary guarantees, is not only at country level, but can combine regional investment, which means investment with neighboring countries, generally speaking, because, for example, you may have some investment that is cross-border between two countries or even more. For example, when we are talking about energy transmission grids, they are generally, because there is a European energy market, so they are connected with the neighboring countries. And there could be also more than two countries involved when there are some investments, like, for example, roads linking more than two countries in the region. So there is the single project pipeline, and in some cases, this single project pipeline includes some regional scope projects, which therefore are contained not only in the single project pipeline of one country, but also of the other country, or the other countries shared the same interest in that project. One example of regional project pipeline is the regional project pipeline that is contained under the Economic and Investment Plan and Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, that is published in the internet. So in this Economic and Investment Plan, there are presented a number of flagship actions that have been pre-selected by the European Commission together, based on the interest, based on a bottom-up interest, I would say, of the 6 Western Balkans countries. And therefore, these flagship actions, some are already prepared, some are under preparation, but they show generally the regional dimension of the pipeline, but in some cases, they are only flagship action for one single country. So the existence of a single project pipeline and of a national investment committee prioritizing the projects under this pipeline is certainly a good practice example. And in the Western Balkans, if one investment proposals is not included in the single project pipeline and is not approved by the National Investment Committee of that country, it cannot be proposed to the international or national in the sense of the EU member states, financial intermediary, and it cannot go up into the process of approval. A good example of blending is provided under the annual program for IPA 2021. And now in the following slides, I am going to present 2 examples of blending, one for the Western Balkans and the following, the one of Turkey, just to give an idea. The first selected blending example is from North Macedonia. It is not a very large size investment, but it is selected. I selected that because it is completed. So there is information available on it. And what you may see here is that the investment, the total investment has been 8.8 million. There is a loan provided by EBRD. So EBRD was the IFI with an interest in this project. There has been a grant under IPA and some bilateral donors, in this case, putting together 1.6 million grant. There has been a national contribution of 1.3 million, and additionally, Italy as a bilateral donor provided an in-kind grant supporting the technical feasibility assessment of this project, which is now completed. And the next, this is a solar photovoltaic plant, North Macedonia. This, as you may see, physically what it is, this solar photovoltaic plant. What is interesting in this project and showing also the additionality is that this was a mine, a lignite coal mine site. So, which is a larger site than the one now occupied by the solar photovoltaic plant. But there is a larger effort by North Macedonia to clean this site and to reconvert it to another purpose. And part of this effort and part of this site is now reserved to this solar plant, and which will produce electricity. And for this production of electricity, there will be saving of emissions of 12,100, etc. annually. So this is an example showing that this is not only an investment in renewable energy, but is also part of environmental project to clean a site. The next example, this is exactly from Turkey, from the EU IPA 2021 annual program of by Turkey. Just as a coincidence, the International Financial Institution is also EBRD, it's just a coincidence. But this project that is titled Maritime Decarbonization and Green Shipping Program is in preparation. It has a total investment costs 77.5 million, the EBRD loan 50 million, and the grant 27.5 million. Is in preparation. And the next and last, please. This project, as the title suggests, Maritime Decarbonization and Green Shipping, will support the projects involving ports, facilities, vessels, and the usual usage of alternative fuels in the Turkish maritime sector. Also in this case, the impact will be to reduce the air emissions and the pollution. And the reason why it is not yet evidenced the private contribution or co-financing is because the individual projects under this program will be selected. So it's a program that is approved, but the individual projects, the individual ports, vessels, etc., are not yet selected. So although in the photo there is the port of Samsung on the Black Sea, it is not because this has been selected for this investment. Hopefully it will be, but it is not yet decided. So these are two examples. Before giving back the floor to Magdalena, I wanted to say that we had selected many more examples that we intend to present in the sectoral focus groups. But one of the interesting aspects is that both of these examples could have been also included under a budgetary guarantee program. Okay, so the floor back to you, Maddalena. Thank you.
Thanks, Valeria. I was actually interesting enough. Somebody shared with me a report yesterday about Turkey. 7 million homes can be, can be using electricity from old coal mines in Turkey. So an interesting example coming from the Western Balkans pipeline. As to the maritime decarbonization green shipping program, once again, as you can see, these are operations investments which involved lending from a development finance institution, and these are private sector operations. At the end of the day, what was possible under blending at the time, because there was no possibility for Turkey to participate in the budgetary guarantee cycle, could be possible, and could be possible with higher volume of finance under the budgetary guarantee. But if there is the intent to have a pilot to demonstrate a very significant result first and then scale up, then I could definitely see also why green decarbonization, maritime decarbonization could be a candidate, first of all, for a blending project, because this is a new sector, right? I mean, and it's a significant contributor to CO2, but there are very few investments, there are very few operations in this sector, not just in Turkey, actually. Turkey is setting an example here globally. This is one of the challenges for the Paris Agreement. So I think these are good examples, just as something to think about. And just maybe to recap briefly again, the differences in the first case, there is transfer of grant, that the grant would reduce the cost for such project. In the second case, there is no transfer of grant money, but there is sharing of risk. The budgetary guarantee would reduce the risk of such project, not just for the development finance institution, but also for private investors participating in the same project or in the same program. So that is a fundamental difference, what is best suited for what. We discussed already. I think it's not like a clear-cut line, but definitely it's something to consider also sometimes on a case-by-case basis. And just maybe also to just mention this point that we discussed in the first session, it is the advantage of budgetary guarantee that blending cannot provide, the advantage of diversification, avoiding putting all the eggs in one basket, in reality, avoiding high concentrations in one sector, being able to work across various priority areas, and in such way also manage the risk. And that allows to take more risk in areas which are really, really high priority, but underdeveloped in terms of investment, where there's significant investment needs and investment gaps due to market barriers, sometimes perceived risks, untested technology, and not just real risks. So that risk management function is very important, and it's possible using the budgetary guarantee approach. And again, when we talk about policy first, the budgetary guarantee also meets the reality of financial markets. It allows flexibility and adaptation based on the uptake of the market. I mean, you see what happened with COVID-19 and the impacts that it had. It allows sharing of risks, which can increase appetite for making investments which otherwise would simply not go ahead. And just some of the key takeaways from this is that, first of all, as I mentioned, a growing portfolio of operations backed by EU budgetary guarantees, around 80 billion. If you look at across, internally and externally within the EU also. Secondly, it's still a relatively new instrument, so it's still a lot of learning compared to blending, which started already 2 decades ago. It's still something relatively new, so still a lot of learning, a lot of processes had to be established for the first time under the first EFSD, and now these principles are used for EFSD Plus in terms of risk parameters, for instance, the maturity, the life cycle of the guarantee, for how long can the cover be provided. However, these are also, I think, elements, aspects that would continue to be fine-tuned. And the biggest advantage, I think, is the open access that allows working across windows and allows innovation. It is really up to the implementing partners to be innovative and to make proposals that meet also the reality and the demand that they see in the market. And again, a number of proposals are expected that would include countries in the neighborhood region, Western Balkans and Turkey. And this could be also part of global proposals, but earmarked for specific policy priorities. All of this means that EFSD Plus is more than money. It is not just the money. I think sometimes we talk a lot about mobilizing private capital, mobilizing more finance from the development finance institutions. But if you think about this, it's not just about the volume of money, it's about the quality of the project, it's about the quality of the money. So it's about, channeling, shaping investment to the things that really matter for today's investment needs, for today's environment and the challenges these days. So it's really about maximizing impact, using these limited funds. These are very valuable funds, and using them to maximize impact by encouraging these partnerships to deliver on these priorities. The partnerships are with public development finance institutions. This is their mandate, but it's also with private sector partners. And in terms of crowding in additional investment by the private sector, this is a significant objective of the open access budgetary guarantee. I think under blending, it's also an objective, but we see private sector coming more often as a contractor to implement some of these public investments. While here, under the budgetary guarantee, it's really also about private sector coming in as a financier, as an investor. Also, the focus is on sectors that have strategic importance, where still their market failures, market conditions do not allow investments to be financed on market terms, on commercial terms. And I think very clearly from the examples also in the discussions we have had, there is a lot of emphasis, great prominence of green sectors and climate targets and innovative financial products, really. And for Turkey to take advantage of all of this, I think what's really important is, first of all, of course, is the in-country dialogue. And secondly, it's a pipeline that is aligned with these priorities and needs. Because again, even if there is a guarantee program, if there is no pipeline that is relatively well established, there will be the likelihood of actual investment is much lower. And I believe also Valeria made this very important point about the single pipeline that is part of a blending process. So I think these are the few final key thoughts that we wanted to share with you, and to see if we still have a bit of time for discussions and some questions that you still want to ask. And we can provide some answers.
Değerli katılımcılarımız, Magdalena ve Valeria'ya da teşekkür ediyoruz yaptıkları sunumlarla bu 2 yarım günlük eğitimimiz kapsamında. Türkiye Yatırım Platformu Mekanizması kapsamında ne tarz ilave finansman imkanlarıyla yürüyebileceğimize yönelik bilhassa Avrupa Birliği ve Avrupa Birliği'nin gene dış yardım kapsamında diğer ülkelerde yürüttüğü gene benzer bölgesel platformlar kapsamındaki örnekleri de vererek yaptığı sunumlar için. Ben soru cevap kısmına bakıyorum. En son 5 adet soruda kalmışız. Onları da zannediyorum süreç içinde zaten yanıt da verdiler. İlave soru varsa tabii ki şu anki süremiz içinde, çünkü süremiz aslında planladığımız süremiz hala var, alabiliriz. Bunun haricinde benim eğer toplamam gerekirse bir parça bu 2 günlük eğitimi ve bundan sonraki çalışmaları, hazır Haziran'ı bulmuşken, şöyle, daha öncesinde de belirtmiştim, Avrupa Komisyonu'nun küresel yaklaşımlar çerçevesinde de önerdiği bir mekanizma. Bu mekanizma üzerinden ilave ama kredi anlamında garanti fonları sağlanabilecek ülkelerin buna tabi ülkelerin, bundan yararlanabilecek ülkelerin aslında dış kredi finansmanıyla olan ihtiyaçları çerçevesinde de değerlendirilebilecek bir mekanizma bu. AB hibesi değil. Evet, AB hibesi ve blending söz konusu da olabilecek ama çoğunlukla garanti mekanizması şeklinde yürüyebilecek bir mekanizma. Bunun ülkemizde nasıl govern edileceği ayrıca bir çalışma konusu olacak önümüzdeki dönemde. Özellikle bu konudaki iki yetkin kurumumuzla yapacağımız bir çalışma olacak. Hazine ve Maliye Bakanlığımız ki zaten uluslararası finans kuruluşlarıyla süreçleri yıllardan beri yürüten kurumumuz ve keza zaten yatırım programlarından da sorumlu ve kalkınma programından da sorumlu olan Cumhurbaşkanlığı Strateji Bütçe Başkanlığımız ile bu eğitim serisinin bundan sonraki aşaması birazcık da buna yönelik olacak. Ancak sizler buradayken biliyorsunuz belki bir kısım katılımcılarımız bilmiyor olabilir bilgi vermek açısından. Bu konuyu bir de teknik seviyede nasıl çalışabiliriz? Yani Project Pipeline Development'a ne yapabiliriz? Üzerine de çalışmalarımız var. Aslında bu dediğim iki husus birbiriyle de son derece bağlantılı hususlar. Bunun için gerek başkanlığımız içinde gerekse Hazine Maliye Bakanlığı ve Strateji Bütçe Başkanlığımızdan bir çalışma grubu oluşturduk. Tüm sektörlere hakim uzmanlarımızdan. Bu çalışma grubuna en son uluslararası finans kuruluşlarının Türkiye temsilcilikleriyle yaptığımız toplantı kapsamında da onlardan da toplantıda alınan prensip karar çerçevesinde onlardan da temas kişisi istedik. Çünkü bu aslında çoklu, entegre bir çalışmayı beraberinde getiren bir süreç olacak. Hızlı da devam etmemiz gereken de bir süreç olacak. Çünkü komisyon bununla ilgili çağrılarına aslında başladı. Diğer kuruluş, önce Avrupa Yatırım Bankası ile oldu. Diğer uluslararası finans kuruluşlarının da çağrıları açılacak ve biz bu çağrıları Türkiye spesifik açmıyorlar tabii, bölgesel bazda açıyorlar ve Türkiye'nin de içinde olduğu portfolyoları ilgili kurumlar hazırlıyorlar. İlgili kurumlar Magdalena ve Valeri'nin de söylediği gibi aslında implementing partners dedikleri uluslararası finans kuruluşları. Onlar bizlerle çalışıp sonrasında komisyona öneriyorlar, propose ediyorlar, teklif ediyorlar. Ve sonrasında kabul süreçlerinden sonraki bir parça değinildi biliyorsunuz. Arkasından finansmanına karar verilen, yani garanti verilecek ve dolayısıyla finansmanı da Alfay tarafından sağlanacak portföylerin uygulaması mümkün olabiliyor. Burada tabii önemli olan husus, sizlerle daha öncesinde paylaştığımız gibi ülkenin hangi tip sektör ve hangi tip finansman gereken projelerini çalışmalıyız konusu. Bunu işte dediğim gibi öncelikle Hazine Maliye ve Strateji Bütçeyle, sonra da yatırımcı kurumlarımızla çalışmamız gerekecek. Bir eğitim sürecinin bir ayağı olarak da zannediyorum takvimlemesi Haziran sonunu bulabilecek ya da Haziran'ı bulabilecek, pardon Mayıs sonunu bulabilecek bir daha fokus gruplarla bir çalışmamız daha olacak. Henüz birazcık fikir aşamasında. Dolayısıyla onun da şimdiden ben bilgilendirmesini vermek istiyorum. Daha konsantre, belki daha limited olabilecek belli bir sektörü belki öncelleyeceğimiz ya da aslında her sektörü öncelleyeceğimiz ama daha sınırlı katılımlı olabilecek bir eğitim ayağımız daha olacak. Gene sizlerle temas halinde olacağız. Dolayısıyla ben şimdilik, eğer ilave soru da yoksa, bu wrap up kısmıyla zaman da kazanmaya çalışıyorum. Belki hala anlatılanlar çerçevesinde akıla takılan sorularımız olabilir. Bu mekanizma ile ilgili bir parça tabii işin doğası gereği yine işin içinde olan uygulayıcı kuruluşların da kendi yol ve yöntemleri çerçevesinde birazcık da yaparak, öğrenerek de gideceğimiz bir sürecimiz de olacak gibi gözüküyor ama tabii dediğim gibi aslında Türkiye bunu ilk defa yapmıyor. Biz bunu EU kontekstine nasıl oturtturacağız? EU'nun önceliklendirdiği Policy First çerçevesinden nasıl gideceğiz? Bunu yaparken gene en son wrap-up'ta ifade edilen işte daha çok market failure'ın olduğu, optimal çözümlerin bulunabileceği ve bu bağlamda daha stratejik önceliklerimizi nasıl seçeceğiz ve dolayısıyla ayfaylarla da antant kalarak bunu komisyona doğru nasıl ileteceğizin süreci aslında özetlemem gerekirse böyle bir sürecin içindeyiz. Tabii sizlerin yakın destekleriyle ancak olabilecek bir şey ama entegre yaklaşımın hep beraber çalışmanın aynı sayfada olabilmenin önemini zaten bu eğitimlerle de zannediyorum süreçler anlatıldıkça şey yapmışızdır. Hep beraber idrak etmişizdir diye düşünüyorum. Eğer ilave bir soru yoksa, ilave bir parmak kaldırmada yoksa ki görmüyorum. And Valerie and Magdalena and Tomasz, if you don't have any further remarks, then I will close this session. And thank you very much for your contributions as well as to contributions made by our translators. Thank you very much. Yeah.
If you can give me a minute, there was a question if there is going to be any guideline document published in any time soon about TIP and and how. Well, it's a part of our mandate, definitely, and sorry, I'm not very conversant with this version of Zoom, which includes interpretation and so forth. And I tried to answer it, and type the reply, but then I lost the message completely. So I wanted to do it online. Yes, Magdalena and Valeria will be working on this document. And we hope to get it done in the next 2.5 months, definitely. Definitely, we need, a kind of interaction with the European Commission services, both at the level of the headquarters and the EUD, because there might be different views on the topic. So yes, I wanted to announce that yes, in the next 2.5 months, we expect to have a kind of document that will link the whole discussion that we have held in the last 48 hours with the discussion that we are hoping to have mid-May as well. And we hope that we can invite as many people from the EU level, from the EC level as possible, because it's all about interpreting the legislation. It's all about interpreting the whole project pipeline. It's all about interpreting different points of views, because actually we would like to engage with the Commission's officials who are involved in the approval or pre-approval of the project pipelines for 2022, 2023, 2024 as well. We hope. As much as we can get out of that interaction with regards to intelligence will be published in a booklet, definitely. I would like to thank you, to thank everybody for contributing to this event, get together today, and we hope to see you face to face mid-May.
Thank you.
Okay, o zaman ben kapatıyorum. Valerie and Magdalena, with our special thanks to both of you, and Judith and Tomasz. Teşekkürler. İyi günler diliyorum efendim. Sağ olun.